I think the thing that would really strike a non-American as distinctive about the American criminal justice system is that it's very fragmented. I mean, everybody knows that America's a federal system, and there is indeed a federal criminal justice system, but there are also state criminal justice systems, which are actually more important numerically. Most criminal law is promulgated at state level, not in the federal system. And on top of that, what people don't appreciate perhaps quite so much is that on top of the state legal system and criminal justice system, there are also local courts, local jails, local institutions of various kinds that have a tremendous impact on how criminal justice works in the US. The federal government, domestically, nationally, has really very restricted powers. It's a real division of labour. Its powers to criminalise conduct are very, very restricted. It's worth just reflecting on the historical basis for that, the nature of the American federal system, which is that America really was not originally one nation. It was constructed out of a number of different proto-states, if you like, or different regions that had been colonised by different groups. But in coming together, the states were already, and particularly some of the states, were already very powerful, and they were reluctant to give up all their power to a federation, not least because they had rather different interests from each other. And that's why you not only have a federal system in the states, but one where states and to some extent localities kept a tremendous amount of power. So you had that localism, but here's the other thing that's really distinctive and perhaps even more important and makes the localism of the states particularly significant, is that many of the actors in relation to criminal justice at local level, police chiefs, district attorneys, are elected, and indeed judges, of course, in most jurisdictions, judges are elected. So you have a very intimate link between electoral democracy and the implementation, and perhaps even to some extent the development of criminal justice policy. These are not party political elections. They're elections where individuals are standing for office, often on the basis of their record in the local community. That means that they have a strong incentive to talk up their particular take on the job, and in a context in which there is a lot of local concern about crime, then it's going to be a very good electoral strategy for the DA, the district attorney, for example, to stand on a toughness record. And I'm afraid that's true of judges as well. How do you establish what the cause of somebody not offending again is? It's very difficult to show that it was a criminal justice intervention that made the difference. Moreover, the things that we do know actually do make a big difference to levels of crime over time are things like housing policy, education policy, and these are more expensive and their effects are longer term. So they're much harder to put across electorally. I mean, what's really appealing to people standing for office about a sort of tough law and order stance or a promise to criminalise something at the state level or the federal level is that it sounds very decisive. You've done something. And it has, not at every point in American history, but certainly in a period from the 1970s on, that sort of appeal to toughness became an extremely powerful electoral ploy at various levels. I think that the danger of this very decentralised system is that the bigger picture doesn't really feature in the decision that is put to each voter. So you might say, well, look, this looks great. It's a really democratic system. You've got a huge amount of popular input into the delivery of criminal justice. And anyway, why should it make a difference that voting is at the local level and the state level or the federal level? And the answer is, first of all, that you get a different electorate at local level. A different lot of people turn out to vote. Fewer people, proportionately turn out to vote in local elections, and they are demographically more privileged. Secondly, their motivations arguably are somewhat different. If you're voting at a state level, then you're happy to vote for any good that will be diffused across that state. If you're voting for spending at local level, then you want to know the benefits are going to stay with you. And so arguably, and there's quite a lot of empirical work on this, a lot of people at local level are largely concerned that they're disproportionately homeowners.
Whether you're home or away, your police department protects your property. Call upon them so that they may serve you day or night.
They're very concerned about the value of their homes. Value of their homes has to do largely with things like levels of crime and levels of education in the schools, good housing, and so on. Arguably, that gives them a motivation to vote more selfishly to keep those resources in their own locality, and they don't care about the quality of policing in schools. And that's putting it very crudely, but there is certainly a greater incentive for local voters to vote, as it were, selfishly in their own interest, their own parochial interest, than is true if you're voting in a bigger political unit. The other thing you don't actually have to think about is where the costs lie. The person who's standing, the DA, is not going to bear the costs. Even the local police chief is not going to bear the costs. They're not even going to bear the electoral costs because they're not being held accountable for the broader outcomes. So, if you like, although it looks like a very, very strong form of electoral accountability, there's actually a bit of an accountability gap because the costs of these policies are being paid by a different level of society and of political system.